Hey guys, welcome back. Let's start talking. Let's continue talking about your psychology, how it works, how emotions work, how decisions work, even better, how decisions relate with your emotions. All this is to say so you can go on to start making decisions that you want to make. Have a willpower. Get your willpower back, and guess what? It doesn't come from just making yourself get your willpower back by waking up at 5 a.m. and taking a bunch of cold showers. I mean, that may help, and that's fun to do, especially when you're going through your serious young man phase. But we need to understand how your psychology works so you can start making decisions that you want to make. Procrastination, that's a big one. Not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You go to do work and you find yourself lost on YouTube. Well, what's the problem? Is it because you're lazy? Is it because you're stupid? I don't know, maybe. You could be lazy and stupid, but I would say more fundamentally, you just need to create a better relationship with your emotions. As lame as that sounds, it is true. Hear me now, believe me later. And on this show, we explicate this. That sounds like a lot. On this show, we explicate this in a bunch of different ways. Sometimes we even talk about prominent cultural events. And that's what I want to do today. The prominent cultural event that I'm talking about, of course, is the movie Faster. The Rock movie that came out, I think in 2010 or 2008. It's almost a B movie. It would have been a B movie, except The Rock was in it. And also that other guy, I forget his name. There's some pretty famous people in this movie. Otherwise, it would have been a B movie. And I like the B movie aspect of it. I like the stupid action of this movie Faster. But boy, there were some issues here. And I think I'm going to relate this back, now that I'm talking about it out loud. I think I'm going to relate this. This helps me think, to talk out loud. I'm here to help you understand how your psychology works. I'm also here to help me make sense of my ideas. So thank you for helping me do that. Also, I'm here to help you fall asleep if insomnia is an issue. Hey Mark, what's your cure for insomnia? How does that relate with your psychology? No cure, no ideas, just listen to this as you're falling asleep. Yeah, so I'm going to relate this movie Faster back to 1984, but you know the book, right? I read it in high school, but I just read it again a couple weeks ago, maybe about a month ago now. And what Faster is, it's this, it's a revenge flick, like that movie Payback, or maybe to Pinky's Up reference, this is a Count of Monte Cristo. This guy is in jail, The Rock, the main character, he's in jail, and he is going around killing people who have wronged him, and through the plot, and there's a pretty good plot, through the revelations in the plot, you find out that he was part of this gang, or he wasn't part of the gang. Well, that's the thing. His brother was part of this gang. They went to rob a bank. They had the money stashed, and the people who ratted them out, the people who let them know where this gang was and where the money was hidden out, this other gang came in and killed them, put a bullet in everybody's head, including The Rock's head. He survived, of course. Like it, I don't know, ricocheted off his arm butter or something. And so that's what The Rock's doing. And so I'm thinking, this is a great movie. But you learn, as the movie progresses, what The Rock was doing in this gang. And The Rock was just the driver, so you have some kind of, a little bit more sympathy for him. I think that's the Saves the Cat. There's that great screenwriting book, Saves the Cat, or Save the Cat. You have to have the hero do something that the audience can empathize with early on. And I guess in one famous movie, the hero literally saves a cat. And this gets you on the hero's side, even though the hero may do some unseemly thing. It's like, well, in the first 5 minutes, he saved this cat from a tree. So he can't be that bad of a guy. And I think The Rock Save the Cat is he was just the driver in this gang that robbed the bank. And then you later find out why The Rock helped. Why The Rock helped his brother. Because his brother had these financial problems. The Rock was never in this gang. He was never a criminal. Which makes you less sympathetic for him. He was never a criminal, and the only reason he helped out his brother is because his brother was in all this debt and he had to pay back gambling money or something. So in a sense, what The Rock did is he had this codependent relationship with his brother. He sacrificed himself. He changed his behavior. Right? This is the essence of a collectivistic mindset. He changed your behavior for the sake of somebody else. This is the neurosis of the day. I am going to change who I am. I'm going to hide who I am. I'm going to not do things that I want to do for the sake of somebody else's emotions, for the sake of somebody else's life. So The Rock is supposed to look like this heroic character, but really what he is he's a codependent mess. I mean, what's so great about the Count of Monte Cristo? I never actually finished the book. That's one of the books that I was thinking about. I was thinking about giving it another try after I'm done with Infinite Jest here. By the way, you guys, I know Infinite Jest, it's long and it probably seems stupid to you and like it doesn't really mean that much. But like I just said, what is the neurosis du jour? That is Infinite Jest. I know I already said this in my video of Infinite Jest. That is Infinite Jest. I mean, it just paints that picture. I mean, no other book. Yeah, you got to read The Man Who Laughs. You got to read Les Miserables. You definitely have to read Brothers Karamazov. And with that, I mean, I will put Infinite Jest in that level of books on that echelon because it just perfectly captures what we're going through, what I know you're going through, what I know I'm going through, what we're all going through. It just paints this picture from a bunch of different angles. It's one of those books. It's like 900 and some pages. That needs to be longer. That's what I think about Les Miserables too. It could have been longer. Like, why don't we get more scenes with Marius and his friends of the ABC? That's only maybe a chapter or two. It's not that long in the book. So that's I'm going to keep talking about Infinite Jest. So I get it. It may seem stupid, and if you're really busy, you don't have a lot of time. But if you're in college or if you're a younger kid, I would definitely recommend you read that book. But what's so great about Count of Monte Cristo? And I'm just speaking of the movies here. The two, the older one and then the more recent one, I think it was from the 90s. What happens when Edmond Dantes goes to jail? He meets the priest, or the abbé, right? And what does he learn? He learns how he messed up. That's what makes the Count of Monte Cristo such a great story for young men. For young men going through this initiation thing. Because you go to jail, you meet the teacher, you meet the wizened old man, the supernatural aide, and he shows you a part of yourself that you didn't see before. He does the bone ceremony thing. He takes you outside your bones. Look at the situation you were in, Edmond Dantes. I mean, yeah, you were set up, but it's so obvious you were being set up, and you just went along with it because you were, a little bit wet behind the ears still. And I love that, I forget the guy who plays Edmond Dantes in the 2001. He just does a great, oh God, I messed up. We all had that. Or, I'm in jail because I messed up. Sure, I can go blame it on other people. And I can say, well, I was manipulated. I was set up. And in a sense you were, but also you kind of were naive. And you need to learn that lesson. And you need to internalize that. And then what happens? I mean, obviously, the symbolism abound. What happens when you internalize that message? You get the treasure of Monte Cristo. That's what happens. So the movie Faster, it is the Count of Monte Cristo without consciousness, without awareness, without the bone ceremony. The Rock never looks in and says, why did I feel like I needed to put myself in such an egregious compromising situation? I had to, in a sense, sacrifice my life because my brother had a gambling problem or whatever it was. There was no awareness, and because of that, there was no real reward for The Rock in this movie. So I guess the movie was good in that respect. It's good that he didn't get a reward because he didn't go in and do the awareness thing. The treasure of Monte Cristo, that's simply a symbolic representation of looking at your own psychological gold. And your own psychological gold is where you messed up. Where you messed up and taking not 99.9% responsibility for it, but 100 complete total. Now, in order to do that, we need to manage our anxiety. Edmond Dantes does that also. It's like one of those, it's a take responsibility trainer. That's what managing your anxiety is. Why have people, especially thinkers, last week or 2 weeks ago, we talked about Conscious of a Conservative, Barry Goldwater, Jordan Peterson. Why do these guys come around every 5, 10, 15 years? These probably more conservative intellectuals, they all say the same thing: take responsibility, take responsibility. But why does it not work? Why do we hear that message for our entire lives? We grew up in certain families. If your name is Seth or Ethan and your parents listen to NPR, my parents listen to a lot of NPR. I still do. It angers up the blood. I like it. So if you didn't grow up in one of those families where your name is Seth or Ethan and my nephew's name is Ethan, doesn't matter, and you're listening to NPR all the time, you're not growing up in those families. why do you come to a place in your life where it's still difficult to take responsibility? Well, it's nice that people tell you to take responsibility, but unless we understand the mechanism behind that, what responsibility really is, how it relates with our emotions, our decisions, then we don't really have any chance of, we can take responsibility in the short term, and we can go watch a Jordan Peterson lecture and feel good for 3.5 days, but as far as it being a lasting change, probably not going to happen. And I'm not saying that to denigrate Jordan Peterson. He's fine. I think he serves his purpose, but he's ultimately not talking about what we need to be talking about. That's what I aim to do on this show. What we need to be talking about is faster. Now it relates to the Count of Monte Cristo. No, but we really do. Rock never had that experience, so he never got gold. The movie just kind of ends, and it's a huge nothing experience as opposed to the Count of Monte Cristo. You look inward, and you get the gold. And this relates to 1984. I talked about a few haunting aspects of 1984. I don't think I mentioned this, though. And the reason why I didn't mention this, because I've mentioned this in a bunch of other podcasts, but it's important to repeat. So one haunting thing was the newspeak, all the new words. And then you go to academia, and everybody is like 2 soul or 3 soul, all these new words. And what these words do is, in a sense, erase thought. Words are concepts. Concepts are words. We can't have thought without well-defined words. So what newspeak does is it takes out words that you're not allowed to say, in a sense. And that's what happens in academia a lot. It's happening a little bit in culture. I don't think not as much as some conservative intellectuals claim it is. But another pretty haunting aspect of 1984 is when Winston is trying to figure out what happened in history. He's just trying to grasp with objective reality. He doesn't know what's real. Who invented the helicopter? Did it come before the party? Was it the party? He doesn't know, because things just get erased. He has no idea. And just the frenetic nature of those paragraphs where Winston was, where Winston was thinking, grasping for reality, but it wasn't there. Like, you need objective reality to be sane. And so much of philosophy now is objective reality doesn't exist. It's all just your consciousness and nothing else. Reality is what you make of it. That is a psychological truth, not a philosophical truth. But the other haunting aspect of 1984 is, in a sense, you can look at this movie. I'm going to relate this back to Faster. In a sense, you can look at this movie, or this book rather, and say the party's right. The party did the right thing. An authoritarian dictatorship was the right thing to do. Why? Because they put Winston in a compromising situation, Julia too, although we didn't get a lens into that, but they put Winston in a compromising situation, and he sold out people who he loved. He sold out Julia because he was afraid. They put him in a situation, right? They tested him. This is what women do to men all the time. God bless them, and men do too, of course. But a lot more emphasis placed on women doing it. Draw whatever cultural conclusion you want from that. But they put Winston in a compromising situation, and he caved. He sold out Julia. He didn't have any integrity. And what happens at the end of the book, after they both have learned to love Big Brother, is they're friendly, but there's no love, right? Because they don't have individual integrity. Because they don't have a solid boundary, because, as represented by Winston being afraid of rats, he has not managed his anxiety in a proper way. There can be no boundary, there can be no individualism, and there can be no love. He meets Julia, I think they're on a park bench or getting a coffee somewhere, and they're friendly, but they're not in love. And you watch and you read that and you think, yeah, Big Brother is right. The party is right. Now, if Winston didn't sell out, then they're wrong. But if we do not have individual integrity, whatever dictatorship does to us is, in a sense, you can make the argument. Sure, I'm just speaking from one perspective here to help us gain a better understanding of what could be going on. We're going to get to it here in the questions. What could be going on with governments gaining power and how that relates to our psychology? Well, if we don't have individual integrity, what right do we have to say you can't do that? What right does Winston have to say that he should be in love with Julia? He doesn't. And he just accepts it at the end. It's not even a question. He doesn't even consider it. And what's going on with this movie Faster? This is clearly a movie for men. My wife hated it. And what's the lesson here? you were a good guy. You were a good guy because you sacrificed your life. In a sense, you were in this codependent, weird sort of enmeshment with your brother, which, by the way, got in the way of him and a wife, him and his girlfriend at the time, him and a potential family. Right, there's that scene, which is just really creepy. Yet we're still supposed. I think the point is we're still supposed to look at The Rock's character by the end of the movie in a positive light. Well, if we as young men or middle-aged men, as I'm becoming, as we go and see these action movies, and this is the lesson, what right do we have? Just like Winston, what right do we have? I mean, let's be honest, to not live in a dictatorship. If this is what we think is normal, healthy, psychological functioning. If you think normal, healthy, psychological functioning is selling out a loved one just because you're afraid, then not only do you deserve to live in a dictatorship, fascist, communist state, whatever it happens to be, but that is a good government for you. That is a good culture for you. That is the culture you need. And I'm watching this movie of Pastor thinking this is just going to be like Predator or, something. And now the movie Payback with Mel Gibson, I think that's an old 90s movie. That's good because it's just these guys who owe him, I think it's like $70,000. Like, you can't believe you're doing all this for $70,000. That's just the personal vendetta that he's going after. That's no codependent enmeshment in there, not that I remember. I don't know. Does anybody make that point? I looked up a bunch of analysis, or some analysis, not a bunch of the movie Faster. Not a lot of analysis on the internet about that, especially now. And I didn't get anything like that. It's like, guys, we got to be really aware of what we're doing here, how we relate with our psychology, because if otherwise, then we deserve to have, I'm going to get to it in the questions, we deserve to have, in a sense, the government come and take away our rights just because there might be a little bit of a scary virus going around. So the first question here is exactly about this. How do we stay calm when our government is, in a sense, in a power trip and taking away our boundary? I think this listener is particularly affected because he has children, and it's interrupting his children's activities. They don't go to school as much. All their probably after school, baseball, football, it's all been canceled, or at least severely delimited. So how do we deal with this, right? All the time I talk about having a boundary and how important it is and how we regulate our emotions to create our identity so we don't get caught in a freaking codependent enmeshment situation like The Rock was with his brother. But what happens when somebody comes and takes away your boundary? And that's really what the government does when it becomes any semblance of a dictatorship. Right? It's, in a sense, telling you what to do. You can't make decisions for yourself. The government's going to make your decision for you. That is the function of you, your boundary, right? Your decisions, your emotions. But what happens? So I talk about, build up your boundary. But what happens when the government comes and takes it away? I think there is an interesting phrase here. The listener says, in the question, the listener says, it's hard to see someone else hurt my kids and me be somewhat powerless to do anything about it. So what are we going to be here, dear listener? Are we going to be The Rock and Faster, or are we going to be Edmond Dantes in the Count of Monte Cristo talking to the priest? I guess I'm the priest here. That's me patting myself on the back. Are we going to talk to a priest? Are we going to gain consciousness? Are we going to gain awareness? Are we just going to go around and become angry at the government without reflecting back on what we could be doing? Yeah, you are somewhat powerless. Are you totally powerless? Are there still things that you can do? And I say this in total empathy. I get what you're going through. It's frustrating. It is. There are still many things you can do. What can you do to create play dates for your children? What can you do to help with their learning? There are tons of things you can do. Our society, our culture, our civilization is, you could argue, being severely at least dented right now. And it's going to be a change. But the challenge of the boundary is, how do we change and adapt to this situation? Right? And, that's difficult for me to say, but there's always something you can do. I also feel, I'm the priest in the Count of Monte Cristo. I'm also Kirk in Charlie X. My favorite quotation from that episode, probably my favorite Kirk quotation from all Star Trek is, there's a million things you can't have. There's a million things you can't have. That's no fun, but it's just the way it is. That's when Charlie gets one-itis for Yeoman Rand, which, come on, who could blame him? That 60s, it's like a stylized beehive. So how could you blame him? But yeah, he has one-itis for this woman who's older than him. She's not interested, but he wants to go after her. It's like, you can't have it. But I think what's so great about that quotation, obviously I'm repeating myself here, what's so great about that quotation is he says there's a million things you can, first he says there's a million things you can't have. Then there's a million things you can have. And right after he says there's a million things you can have, what does he say? It's no fun. And that just speaks directly to this human condition, to this payoff that we all go into, the secondary emotional payoff. Are you really as stuck as you think, or do you just like getting that payoff of being, quote, oppressed by the government? And you are oppressed to some degree. Of course you are, right? Not in a Nazi prison camp. Like, a very similar situation. Like, I think I mentioned in my book, Shelf Review, it's up there. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. I mean, this is a guy who was in a Nazi prison camp. His wife died, I think all of his children died, and he's sitting there in this prison camp, and he says, even in this situation, I have control over my thoughts. There is a stimulus, there is a response. I create a pause between the stimulus and the response, even in this situation. Now I know what our government is doing may be oppressive. I don't think it's quite as oppressive as the Nazis and putting people in death camps or gulags, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. So be careful. Be careful about the payoff. Somewhat powerless. You're not totally powerless. And when you're there feeling powerless, and when you're asking me this question, what do I do? I'm being put upon by the government, and you are. You're right, you are. I totally agree. But does that explain your feeling of powerlessness? No. Those are two different things. This is what we talk about here with the nature of propaganda. What is propaganda? Is it lying? No, it's not lying. People get lies after a while. It's telling a fraction of the truth, but not the entire truth. So you tell the fraction of the truth that you like to put you in the psychological headspace where you're in the path, where you feel stuck, where you're feeling that resentment, when you're blaming other people, when you want to lash out and maybe you get even violent. I think that's part of the payoff. And so this is, in a sense, propaganda, right? There's that MGTOW propaganda and manosphere propaganda. I talk about that a lot. MGTOW's right. It is totally correct. Everything that they talk about is 100% correct. Yeah, there are issues in culture. Yes, divorce courts are favoring women more. Yes, prenups get thrown out. Yes, there's all these issues. Is that everything? Or are you just focusing on those things that you're right about, just like this listener is focusing on the oppression of the government to feel stuck? So now you don't have to, most likely with MGTOW guys, face your fear of talking to women and connecting with them, which I think means even more now, right? You connect with women not in spite of any cultural problems you see, but precisely because of it. I'll just use me and my wife as an example. Not that we're this perfect relationship, this perfect couple, and you should use us as an example. But we see through some of the BS going on, especially with sexual politics, and I feel more connected with my wife because of that, because we both see it. Like if there's some feminist message on TV or something, and she kind of rolls her eyes, right? I feel more connected with her. Or I'm sure she feels more connected with me when there's some MGTOW thing going on and I just kind of roll my eyes. She's like, in a way, she can empathize with what MGTOW guys are going through, but she's like, well, at least I didn't get a guy who succumbed to that. Right? The reason why I'm married now, happily married today, we'll see what happens tomorrow. And the reason why I'm happily married today is because my husband didn't fall for that. Same thing with me in feminism, right? So, yeah. But so that's external propaganda, right? That's external propaganda, but there's internal propaganda. And that's what putting yourself in the payoff is. That's what neurosis is. That is what reading the headlines about what Gavin Newsom is doing and shutting down. Right? That is your own internal propaganda for the purpose of making yourself feel stuck. This is why Politicians use propaganda on people because they want you to feel stuck, because when you feel stuck, guess what? Now you need them. And this listener belies what he says here in this next question. He says that I mentioned on the podcast with the same listener that the reason why the government's taking advantage, was my point about Winston in 1984, the reason why the government's taking advantage and taking control of more things than perhaps they really, or would be helpful for them to take control of, let's just say, is because people are afraid. That's my point. Like Winston. The reason why the government is right to take control of Winston is because he's afraid. He's afraid of rats. He can't stand up for himself in the face of his fear and the people who he loves. So he doesn't deserve to be a free man. But this listener says, I don't see that. People aren't afraid. They're just acting like they are. But underneath it all, they are really resentful and hostile. Okay. Well, great. You have 2 children. Reach out with these people. It sounds like a great opportunity here. Again, like creating a healthy relationship in a culture where maybe sexual politics is a little bit off. You're not seeking out making friends for not only you, but your children in spite of what's going on, but precisely because it's going on, because you get this intuition of where people are coming from. So bring it up to them. Why aren't you reaching out to these people? Do you just want to feel stuck? Or maybe something else is going on. Maybe I don't have a clear picture. Like, I'm not condemning you. I'm just saying this is what we all do. And we just got to be careful. Are we really stuck, or are we just focusing on the facts that make us feel stuck so we now don't have to do anything? Right? Listener asks, how I manage Gavin Newsom. I live in California, if you didn't know. And honestly, I don't think about it. There's a million things I can't change, or I can't have, but a million things I can have. I think that's the most important thing for me. It's good to have some kind of outlet. What's it called? It's good to have a way out, right? Like, you're going to be happy in your relationship with a woman if you know you can go out and meet other women if you need to. Now, hopefully you don't, right? Everything works out, but you're going to be happy. You're going to be more honest. You're going to be more connected with that woman if you know you're not just doing it to stay in that relationship. Because if, push comes to shove, if you break up with her, or, if something terrible happens, well, you can go out and find another woman so you don't feel trapped. Have a better relationship with that woman because of that. It seems paradoxical, but when you understand psychology and how it works, and how developing a healthy boundary works, makes a lot of sense. So have a way out of wherever you're living. I know we've been talking about it. Where are we going to leave California? I mean, there's talk here. I would say, okay, this is not. This is Uncle Mark talking. This is not therapist, guy who knows a lot about psychology, Mark talking. So don't take this as any kind of real advice, but I don't know exactly when it's going to happen. I was just talking to my buddy about this. I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but boy, it really seems like the dollar is going to collapse. I don't know how fast it's going to happen. I don't know exactly when it's going to happen. I know guys are out there saying, it's going to collapse any day. I don't think anybody really knows, but everything that's going on, the dollar is going to collapse, which is fine. That's what currency does. It collapses. I would just say, maybe you'd feel better. Maybe you feel less depressed if you go buy a bunch of gold in Bitcoin. Again, that is not financial advice. Lord help you if you're taking financial advice from me. But maybe buy some gold, buy some Bitcoin. Tell me how you feel after that. Now let's see how much time we have here. Okay, going to answer these other questions here. So the next question is, do we really need affection from our wives, girlfriends, spouses, significant other, whoever it happens to be? And what is the distinction between wanting affection from our wives, girlfriend, spouse? I'm just going to say wives, that's fine. You insert whatever, not going to say partner, but you insert whatever is relevant for you. What's the difference between wanting affection from them and needing it? This listener thinks that he wants affection from his wife, but he may think that it's validation that he's seeking, right? And I think maybe the question is, how do you tell the difference? Well, same thing that I told the previous listener, right? This is a question. There's maybe your wife has issues. Maybe, by the way, if your wife is resentful, got ahead of myself. If your wife is cold and not giving you affection, 9 times out of 10, and by 9 times out of 10, I mean 99 times out of 100, that is because she is resentful of you, and the reason why she is resentful of you isn't because of anything that you've done, but more likely there's overall lack of communication in the relationship. So it's kind of your responsibility as the man. I mean, it's your responsibility too as the woman in a relationship. But again, we're talking about you and what you need to do to fix your situation. Like Edmond Dantes, not like The Rock. It's going to open up communication as much as possible if you see that she is cold. But also, like the previous listener is going through, yeah, you can look at what the authoritative government is doing and saying how this is illegal and how the president needs to go and arrest governors. And that could all be true, but there's also a lot that you can do. Do you really need affection from your wife, or are you just looking for validation because you have a difficult time validating yourself? And this is where therapy comes in. We got to get really honest about where we are hiding, where we are turning away from our anger, where we have needs that have gone unmet for years, perhaps decades, and are turning away from them. We do it unconsciously. We don't even think about it. We walk around with this sense of invalidation, and we think it's just how we feel. And then our wife doesn't hug her and kiss us enough, or doesn't rub our feet enough, or tells us that she loves us enough, and we think, oh, the problem's her. We got to be Edmond Dantes, not The Rock. We got to look inwards. I mean, affection from your wife is nice, it's great, or from any girl, right? It's nice, it's great, but if that is the main driving force, it's just going to be, your life is going to be way more difficult than it needs to be, and you think it's going to be something about life or existence, and you're going to go and start to read a bunch of existentialist philosophy and Camus and Sartre, but it's going to be about you and your emotional issues that you project out onto existence. The ice cream cone analogy, right? I know I've used that analogy before. Affection from a woman, attention from a woman, or getting any one particular woman if you're dating, it's an ice cream cone. What happens when you drive to the ice cream shop to get ice cream with your buddies, your family, when we used to do things like that, and you find out that it's closed? What's your reaction? Ah, shucks. Well, maybe we'll come back tomorrow. That's about what your reaction, if you're a healthy, well-validated guy, that's about what your reaction is when a girl doesn't like you, or your wife doesn't kiss you enough, or she seems cold one day. It's like, oh shucks. Anyway, back to my life and everything that I have going on. Back to the million things I can have. Because I process the payoff. Because I work through my issues. I manage my boundary. Back to the million things I can have. And, as always, I just got to say, how to get women to validate you, of course. This isn't why you're doing it, but a great side effect of validating yourself is that women tend to validate you. Women tend to give you affection. That's pretty much how it works. And it works pretty much like clockwork. So if you're not getting the affection that you want, again, first thing you do is you look inward. When you get really good at validating yourself, get really clear about your needs, and you're just pouring your life into that, amazing. Women just happen to show up. Interesting how that works. Now, I say that, that's more of a figure of speech. Women don't show up. When I say that, I think, well, I'm just going to work on my, go into monk mode, and a woman will just show up when I become attractive enough. That's not really how it works. You still have to express yourself sexually. You still have to initiate yourself sexually. You got to get really comfortable expressing sexuality in a socially appropriate way. That's how you really magnify any kind of work that you're doing on yourself. But again, this all goes back to Dantes versus The Rock. You gotta look inward. Are you really validating yourself? Where are you hiding? Let's just get crystal clear, honest about this. And then again, what issues does your wife have with you? Right? What issues? What resentment does she have that may lead her being cold? Talk to her about it. It's okay. It's normal for people to have resentments in a relationship. I don't believe it. If they don't, it's normal for people to hurt each other, to harm each other. It's fine. That's not the problem, usually. Unless it's, a really big thing. The problem is we can't talk about it. We can't express ourselves. That's where the resentment comes in. And the resentment we find is often about us and our inability to communicate it. But you're in this relationship with your wife, so talk to her about that if anything like that could be going on. And then we have, well, we got some other questions here. I'm just going to finish up with this one because I didn't really look at these other ones, and I want to give you guys good answers here. This one's kind of funny. Good one in on, I guess. Why do people at water parks and amusement parks seem fat and stupid? This listener says tickets to these places cost a huge amount of money, so how can they afford this? Is it because these places are just about being entertained mindlessly? Well, I take offense to that as somebody who really enjoys riding roller coasters. I grew up somewhat by, within 45 minutes of Cedar Point, which is definitely the best amusement park in the world. I mean, nobody even questions that. I take offense to this. I mean, that was just so much of my childhood. It's just like going to Cedar Point, staying at the Breakers, camping with my parents' friends, eating saltwater taffy, riding the Raptor. That's it for me, right? But I don't understand what you're talking about. I don't know. I mean, it could be that you go there to be entertained mindlessly, but also, like I was saying, I don't know. We're not getting any psychological benefit here. It's fine. But also, what I was saying, well, no, we are. Because this could just be America. Like I said, when we drove across, when we moved from New York to California 2 years ago now, man, we drove across the country and we just saw everything. We saw all people from all walks of life, all parts of the country, and I just can't believe how fat everybody is. And not like, I'm not being like, oh, you have to have the absolutely correct waist to height ratio. No, I'm not the skinniest guy. But just humongous, 300, like 5'10", 300 pounds. There's a lot of that. Is this just the water park? Is this just the amusement park? Is this America? Right? And I know, I don't want to make a political point here, but we need to be aware. If you're one of these people who are upset at immigrants, and I understand, God, I can't even bring this up, but without getting... because there's a lot of nuance here with the immigration talk. But it's interesting. This one day I was in Wisconsin, I just saw tons of humongous white people. People who can barely walk. And, it's humongous black people in urban areas. Humongous white people more in the country. But then we go to the hotel that night, and the Indian people, of course, running the hotel, they're not fat. They're the only two thin people that I saw all day. And they were Indians. You got to understand what's going on to America is what I'm saying. And if you are against immigration and you think that people just want to flood this country with immigrants and we're doing just fine and people want to replace you, maybe. Or do you want to replace yourself? Look at yourself. Have you measured your waist recently? I'm not saying you have to be the skinniest person in the world, but if you're 5'10", 300 pounds, guess what? That's not Monsanto. That's not because we replaced animal fat at McDonald's with vegetable oil. That's not because of high fructose corn syrup and how that spikes your blood glucose more or spikes your insulin more. That is because you are in pain. That is because you are in pain. And one great way to distract ourselves from pain, the opioid thing, of course, but also eating. Also eating a lot. Before you... and I'm not against criticizing anybody, and immigrants are people, so I think we should criticize immigrants, right? So it's not about that. But if this is you, and I'm not saying this is a listener, I'm not speaking to a listener anymore, I'm just speaking to audiences and people on YouTube in general. If this is you, just look at yourself. We got to be Edmund Dantes in our personal life, but we got to be Edmund Dantes also on a national level, on a state national level, before you start criticizing other, it's is it us? I think part of it might be us, right? So I think what you see is not about amusement parks. You just see it more there because there's water rides, and you go to a water park and you actually see somebody in a bathing suit. And it's, you can tell they just haven't taken the tape measure to their gut in a while. They are tuned out, they lack awareness. But that's what I want from you guys, and that's what I want from me. All of us. I think we can all do it a little bit more each day. look in, tune in, be ever more like Edmond Dantes, be ever less like The Rock. If you have any questions for me, Animus at animusempire.com. We got a couple more here, but there's room for more. And of course, we do free consultations here. If you want help managing your emotions, or if you just want to reach out and talk to somebody, maybe get some feedback, that's really great too. Just want to hear what's going on. Let me know what's going on with you. animusempire.com/schedule. Thank you. I will leave it there, and I wish you all the pain and joy that comes from getting your needs met.